In this Python and Pygame tutorial, you're going to be learning how to build a game similar to the one that you see on screen now. All of the art assets come from a pack I got from itch.io, link in the description. This tutorial series is aimed at people who already know how to write code in Python and have some experience with Pygame, but are looking to improve their skills. So with that, let's get into it. The first thing that we're going to need to do is import Pygame and initialize it. And now we're going to have to set up a screen. So to do that, we say display is equal to pygame.display.set_mode. And then inside this tuple, we're going to want the size of our screen. So we're going to want 800 by 600, as that's a good size that works for us. So now we have to set up our while loop. So essentially the while loop is going to be the code that runs 60 times a second. And inside here, we're going to do some basic stuff. The first thing that we're going to want to say is display.fill, and then we're going to want to get a color for here. So I'm just going to say, we're just going to put inside here the RGB value for black for now. So that will be the color of our screen, but we'll change this later. Then we want to come down here and we're going to say pygame.display.update, which will update the display. And then inside here, this is where the magic is going to happen. But before we get to that, the first thing that we're going to need to do is define a clock. So we're going to say Pygame clock is equal to pygame.time.clock. And what this was going to be allow us to doing is running our game at 60 frames per second. So at the bottom here, we just say clock.tick. And then inside these brackets, we put the frame rate. So we're going to want to run this game at 60 frames per second. So let's start writing some of the main game code. The first thing that we're going to need a handle for is whenever we click this X button in the top of our screen, we're going to want to close the program. So Pygame doesn't know how to do that by default. So we're going to have to write some code that tells Pygame how to do this. So for this, we're going to say for event in pygame.event.get. We're going to say if event.type is equal to pygame.quit. So if we've quit Pygame, then we're going to want to do something in here. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import something called sys, which stands short for system, and we're going to say sys.exit and pygame.quit. So essentially we're going to quit the system, quit from the Python script, and then just make sure that Pygame is also quit. So if we go ahead and run this, and I'm using Atom here, so for me that's going to be Control-Shift-B, then you can see, sure enough, we have our window here, and whenever I click on X, the program will close. Cool. So as you read in the title, this video is going to be all about setting up some player movement and some basic shooting. So let's go ahead and do that. So for that, we're going to be doing this in object-oriented form, and a lot of people get scared with object-oriented programming, but I'm here to assure you that it's not that bad, and I'll take you through every step of the process. So we're going to create what's called a dunder class here, which is essentially a double underscore class, and this is a special class, or a special function, should I say, that will initialize our variables in this case. So this one's called def__init. And here we put in self. Whenever we're working inside a class, the first argument of a function is always self. That's just something you have to get used to. Then we're going to need an x for our player, a y for our player, a width, and a height. So the next thing that we're going to need to do is initialize all these variables. And the way you do that inside this dunder function is you say self.x is equal to x, self.y is equal to y, self.width is equal to width, and self.height is equal to height. Now that we've initialized everything, we can actually get to the fun part, which is drawing our player onto the screen. So I'm going to come down here and make a new function called main. So this is going to be all the main code for our player, and as I mentioned, the first variable we need is self, and the second one we need is display. Because we need to have a display, the name of the display that we want to display our player onto. So For now, our player is going to be a rectangle. Don't worry, we will get to adding our sprites in at a later stage in this tutorial series. So we're going to say pygame.draw.rect, which is how you draw a rectangle in Pygame, or a square in this case. We want to draw it onto the display. Then we're going to need a color. So I'm just going to say 255,0,0, which is the RGB value for red. And then, so if you're going to work with Pygame, I recommend learning how the RGB system works, because that's what Pygame uses for its colors. Then we're going to need to come here and we can say self.x, which is going to be our x position. So everything inside this tuple is going to be basically the positioning of our player. Self.y. And then we're also going to need the self.width and self.height. Okay, so this class is going to be getting more complex as we go on, but for now, this is good. However, now if we run this isn't going to do anything, obviously, because we need to make an instance of this class. So for that, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say player. This time the lower caps is equal to player. This time upper class, because we're referring to our class. And then we're going to say let's just split this at 300, let's just go 400, 300 for the x and y, and let's just do 32 by 32 for the width and height. Okay, so now we're nearly ready to test this, but before that, we actually need to call this player.main function. So now that we've assigned this variable to our class, we can call all of our class's functions from this variable. So we can say here player.main, and then we can pass in the display. Cool, so now if I go ahead and run this, you will see that, yep, sure enough, we have our little player on the screen at the position 400, 300, and okay, that's cool. Okay guys, so just one quick thing I've done is I've changed this color here to a nicer shade of green, just so that it will fit in nicer with the assets that we're going to be using later on. Okay, so let's make some movement. So there are two ways to go about movement that I've seen in Pygame. You can either check for movement with the keys and then affect the X and Y position of the player. Or what you can do is you can affect everything around the player and keep the player at the same spot. And that's going to work for us because of some stuff we're going to be doing later on. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to make a new variable here called display scroll. And I'm going to set this equal to a list with two numbers in it. Both of them are 0. The first one represents X, second one represents Y. Just keep that in mind. Now, below our event loop here, what I'm going to do is I need to get a list of all of the keys that are pressed. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to say keys is equal to pygame.key.get_pressed. So what this does is it just returns all of the keys that are being pressed into this list. So now what I can say is if pygame if keys, and then we can index pygame.k_a. So if that's key code for if the A is pressed. And what we can say is display _scroll index 0 minus equals 5. So that's going to be our speed at which everything around us is moving. And since this is an A key and A is on the x-axis, we're going to be affecting the 0th index of this. Now we're going to come here and we're going to copy this code a few times. And we're going to change this to a D. We're going to change this to a W. And we're going to change this to an S. So this here we can just change to a plus. This we need to change to a 1 because W is on the y-axis, and we can also just keep this a negative, and S also on the y-axis, and we're going to make this a plus. So now this will be working, however we have nothing to reference it again, so it's not going to look like anything's changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another rectangle here, and I'm going to draw it, and we'll make this one white, which is 255, 255, 255, and then for the coordinates. I'll just make it 100, 100 for the x and y, and 16, 16 for the width and height. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this variable affected by our list. So I'm going to affect the x by the display scroll x, and I'm going to affect the y by the display scroll y. Okay, so basically, now if we go ahead and run it, what's going to happen is that I can move around with the arrow keys, and it's going to look like my player's moving around, but it is actually this white box moving around. The player is staying completely still, but it gives this really cool illusion, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to be covering in this tutorial is going to be bullets. So specifically, it's going to be the player shooting bullets. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to come here and make a new class called player. Classes are always with a capital. You guys pointed that out in the comments on one of my last videos. So we're going to call it player bullets because we're going to be calling it player bullet is because we're also going to have enemy bullets later on. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, we're going to create this dunder function again. We're going to need an x, y. We're going to need a mouse. Let's call x, which is just the position of our mouse. I'll show you how we can get that now. And using these, we're going to calculate some angles. So what we're going to do, I already have a video on this, so I'm going to be going through it pretty fast because I don't want to explain everything here because I've explained it in a little bit more depth in my video. But we're going to need math, the math module, which comes pre-built into Python, but you do need to import it so that we can calculate some functions on these numbers. So the first, let's just define our basic variables, self.x, self.y, self.width is equal to width, self.height is equal to height, and then we're going to need to calculate, we're going to also need a self.speed, which I'm going to hard code to 15. Now, we're going to need to calculate an angle. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to use the math.atan2 function, and this is going to need y minus mouse underscore y, x minus mouse underscore x. Now, oops, let me just make sure that is angle. Now let's make a self.x underscore velocity, and this is going to be math.cos. Math.cos, we're going to do the cos function on this angle, and then we're going to multiply this by speed, and for the y, we're going to do self_y under vel is equal to math, and we'll make sure this is a math.sin function on the angle multiplied by speed. Okay, so that's all of the initialization we have to do. Now we can actually get on to writing the main function. So we can put in self here, display. Now, we're going to, first, we need to offset these x and y variables by our velocities that we've just created. So we're going to say self.x minus equals the integer. So we're going to take the integer value of self.x underscore vel. And the reason we're taking the integer is because we don't want any weird decimal errors, because Pygame sometimes doesn't handle decimals that well. Then we're going to do the exact same thing for the y side of things. Cool. Now we're going to draw a circle. So instead of pygame.draw.rect, we're going to say pygame.draw.circle. We're going to draw it at the display, obviously, and we're going to make it white. Actually, no, let's make it black. So black is 0, 0, 0. Then we're going to draw it at self.x, self.y, and then obviously this is a circle, so we don't have a width and height. We instead have a radius, which I'm going to make 5. Okay, so now we've pretty much done the player bullet stuff. Now we're going to need a list, which is going to be responsible for handling all of the bullets on the screen. So I'm going to say player underscore bullets is equal to a blank list. And essentially, whenever I click the mouse button, what we're going to do is we're going to append an instance of the bullet to this list. And then once the bullet is in this list, we can iterate over this list and call the main function on every instance of the bullet in the list. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, don't worry, because it will make sense once we've written the code. So the first thing that we need to do is check for mouse presses. So we're going to say if event dot type equal to Pygame dot mouse button down, and then we're going to check another time if event dot button is equal to 1, because we want to first check if one of the mouse, so this is basically just general for if anything on the mouse is clicked down, right or left button, and then 1 is the index for the left mouse button. So we only want to shoot if the left mouse button is coming down. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to say player underscore bullets dot append. So this is basically adding to the list. And now we're going to say player bullet. And then here we're going to pass in our things. So we're going to say player dot x, player dot y. So because we have set this variable equal to an instance of our player, we are able to reference all of the classes, the player classes variables, through this variable. So then we're going to say, now we need the mouse x and y. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to say mouse underscore x, comma mouse underscore y is equal to Pygame dot mouse dot get underscore pos. This just gets the position of the mouse and throws it into these variables. And then here we can just say mouse underscore x, mouse underscore y. And now what we need to do is, nothing's going to happen currently if we run our game. So what we need to do is we need to iterate over every bullet in this list. So for bullets in player underscore bullets, we're going to call the main function on this bullet. So we're going to say bullet.main, and then we're going to pass in the display. Okay, so now theoretically, up to this point, everything should be working. So if I run the script, hopefully you can see we can move around and... Oop. So I have made a little mistake here. I've set this should be mouse underscore x is equal to mouse, I'm getting confused. Mouse underscore x is equal to mouse underscore y is equal to mouse underscore y. So sorry, so just not width and height, that was a little mistake on my part. So let's just run it again. Oop, that's not okay, so let's just run it now, and we should theoretically... Oh. Okay, so we need to say self.speed here, because it's a variable of our class. Okay, and now we're going to, if we run it, there we go. We can see that we can shoot bullets. However, there is one big flaw with this right now. Currently, if I shoot and then move upwards, the bullet moves upwards with me. Now, this is where things get a little bit confusing, because... we see, when I was first making a top-down shooter game, me and my friends spent a very long time trying to debug this error, because the thing with the scroll is that because of the way we're calculating the maths on this, the scroll just doesn't work, or at least I couldn't find a way that it does work. So this is kind of a bit of a weird solution to the problem, but it does work in the end. So what we do is we come down to the A, we come down to where we get checking for button presses, and what I do is I say for bullet in player underscore bullets, bullet dot x plus equals 5. So we basically send the bullets in the opposite direction to the scroll. So, and then what we do is we just copy this, paste it in here, make sure it is indented correctly, and we set this to a minus, paste it again, set to the Y and make sure that it's a plus, because we want to make it so that it's always the inverse of what we're affecting to the scroll. Just copy this again, paste it in here. And we would just want to set this to a negative. And now you can see the error is fixed. So if I come and I shoot a bullet and then walk upwards, the bullet does not follow us, but rather keeps on the same trajectory. Okay guys, so I think this is where I'm going to be ending it for this tutorial. In the next one, things are going to get more exciting, because we're going to be loading in the sprites. We're going to be getting some animations going, hopefully also some enemies. So if you're watching this in the future, then you can just find the next part of the series in a playlist. But if you're watching this directly after it comes out, then you're probably going to have to wait about a week for the next episode. Anyway guys, I hope you like this tutorial series. If you do, make sure to subscribe so you can see the next episode. Keep on coding, and I'll see you all next time.